All right. Well, welcome, Kevin, to SFC's podcast. Kevin and I were just chatting a little bit about how we recently both got married. I got married about a month ago, and so did Kevin also in Mexico, both of us. So that's been fun. Kevin works at Jasper. I'm going to let him introduce himself. So, Kevin, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you and what you do at Jasper?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Kevin. I'm a director of strategic finance at Jasper. So Jasper is an AI co-pilot for marketing. And so we really are focused on helping marketers and go-to-market teams really get the best out of generative AI and specifically speaking in their tone of voice and using their company knowledge. What I do at Jasper is I work on our finance team, particularly focused on strategic finance. And what that means is really working with the company to analyze, forecast, and ultimately plan for the company finances and the sort of trajectory that we want to go on as a company.
Cool. So we'll jump into a little bit of strategic finance, but before that, how does Jasper make money? In like 30 seconds, how would you explain to somebody how Jasper makes money?
Yeah, so we are a subscription business, so pretty traditional enterprise SaaS. So through you can either swipe your credit card on our website, check out a personal plan. We have multiple different tiers based off of the needs of our customers. But then as you kind of grow with the team and specifically for enterprises, you can then work with our sales team to sign up for essentially a plan for your team, and then really work on the standard recurring revenue model.
Gotcha. Cool. So a whole wide range of customers, early stage all the way to enterprise.
Yes, yeah. It's anything from a small team of maybe 2 to 5 people all the way to, Fortune 50 type customers, both in the US and international.
Great. Got it. So obviously, we focus here a lot on strategic finance. This is a new sort of career path, new field, probably in the past 5 to 10 years. A big question we always get is, what exactly is strategic finance? So in your mind or in your words, how would you describe strategic finance?
It's a good question because it covers a lot and it also varies a lot at different companies. Maybe I'll start with the top and then we can sort of dive down a little bit. But I think the
Yeah.
main goal of strategic finance is to really work with the executive team to chart the essentially financial journey and financial goals of the company. So that could literally mean everything from creating the plans that you work with and share with your board members and investors all the way down to approving invoices and making sure that people are spending below the budget when they go travel on a small company trip. But the range of activities can really vary, and so you're really working on an executive level at every company that I've been at in this function. Whether it's working with the CEO, whether it's working with your different functional leaders like the VP of sales or the VP of engineering, to really think about from a monetary basis what the specific quarter is going to look like, and then ultimately what that year is going to look like, and then ultimately what we want the long range plan of this company to be. And so that encompasses things like pricing decisions. That encompasses things like headcount planning. That encompasses things like what is our revenue forecast? How do we manage our cash? What do we want to do with a specific hire or a specific team if we do hire them? And then ultimately that all sort of lays down and falls into what are the goals for the company on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis, and then on a multi-year basis.
Got it. So that's very insightful. Thank you. And so clearly, Stratfin touches a lot of different parts, right? You mentioned headcount, pricing of the product, all that. Um, how does somebody break into strategic finance, and maybe even particularly yourself? It sounds like you need to know a lot of the different business. You probably have to, wear different hats. So how does, or even before how you suggest for somebody else, how did you break in, or what made you want to join a Stratfin team?
Yeah, so my journey has sort of been interesting and, not very direct, I'd say. So my personal experience was I in school studied finance and marketing, and then I joined Dropbox out of school as part of a rotation program. And that rotation program, we got to jump in, sort of wear a few different hats in the beginning, just to sort of see where we thought we would fit within the company. And ultimately, I got placed on a rotation on the finance team within the strategic finance organization, and that was sort of my sort of movement into there. Since then, I have sort of done a few different things. I spent some time on the venture side, and then ultimately, after that venture experience, jumped back into strategic finance. And so, I'd say the best way for folks who are interested in this career is to really start at the foundations. And I mean, I think everybody I've worked with on the strategic finance side of things has a solid foundation of finance and accounting principles, understands, what are the different levers that folks can pull from a business perspective to really sort of move the company forward. And then I think the other kind of key commonality across the people I've worked with is really analytical. So you're working with data, you're working with financial numbers, you understand how they all flow, and then ultimately roll up into the bigger picture. And so I'd say starting with those three sort of foundations, it's really, there are multiple different ways to get into it. I know folks who have come from the finance and consulting side of things. I know folks who have come from the accounting side of things. I know folks who have come from not even like a traditional finance background, but have learned and worked with the teams on an ancillary basis within the company, and then jumped onto it. So there's a lot of different ways to get in.
Got it. Well, that's an interesting background. And you were at Dropbox, and some people say Dropbox is where strategic finance was created, about 10 to 12 years ago. So that's really interesting to hear. So if we take, a little bit of a higher or a bird's eye view, where do you think strategic finance fits in at Jasper, or even in general? Like, if you were to map it out, is it somewhere in the center? Is it mainly at the C levels? And then where does that sit next to maybe a traditional potential FP&A team or an accounting team?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say, in my experience, and I'll speak a little bit more on the current state of affairs at Jasper. It's really a multi-touch relationship. So we have those relationships at the executive level, working with, insert VP of whatever here. And so that's where I think, really start a lot of our conversations about what are the key things that we want to plan for, either, this quarter or this year. But then once we sort of have those I guess, key points that we want to really talk about. Once we sort of have the objectives, we then work with the full teams underneath. And so we'll work with our head of, say, infrastructure, or we'll work with specific PMs on different areas of the budget and the forecast to really sort of narrow and get a little bit closer to those forecasts, and get closer to how do we really achieve those objectives. And so I'd say it's a multi-pronged approach. You have to sort of work with everybody. And I think a key thing at Jasper is a lot of our team really has a good understanding of the full business. And so really where, we play in is kind of putting all of the different pieces of information together when we work across the business to understand how the full sort of company can achieve, those goals that we set out for the year. And yeah, I think as a relationship to how it works with potentially traditional FP&A or like other accounting teams, at Jasper, we sort of, it's a relatively small team, so we wear multiple hats. We do the traditional FPMA stuff, we do the traditional strategic finance stuff. But I think overall, one trend I've noticed across companies is that the two are really starting to meld together. And I think it's really hard to sort of do one without the other. And so I think that's a good thing to see, that, you might have the more traditional path working with this more sort of nuanced and like modern strategic finance FP&A individual, because that I think was what's really valuable. You need to really understand the nitty gritty to be able to understand, how you can use all of that to plan for the future.
Got it. Thank you for that. And so I just wanted to maybe jump in a little bit with your relationships across the different, enter VP of whichever role. How does one go about building those relationships? Let's say you join Jasper or whichever company in the StratFin function. What's sort of your tactics or tips on building those relationships, getting that trust or getting that street credit from them, and say, hey, like, Kevin can be a good thought partner, and he can really help me, explore this. Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah. I got some good advice from a friend a while ago, and this isn't even just like working with, like, say, the VP of whatever. This is, I think, any job and any initial sort of way to jump into a role. I think the first, like, month to 3 months is really key. And so, like, jumping in, really trying to sort of get on board as quickly as possible, and then offering to help anywhere that you can. That is really, I think, crucial to make sure that you have a fast start, because you can sort of, prove your worth, but also prove that, like, hey, like, we're on the same team here, and then we can be a resource to this individual who's sort of been here a little longer. I think a good thing that I've always sort of embodied is you want to sort of think like either your boss or think like, the business partner that you're working with, because when you sort of have that mentality, you can really potentially anticipate their needs and sort of, become like, a go-to person for them. And so, for example, if you're working with a VP of sales, and one of the questions that they're going to anticipate is like, hey, like what does the next quarter look like in terms of potentially pipeline generation, or how's my team doing on like quota achievement. That's something they're going to be thinking about every single time. If you can potentially get ahead of it. Same thing with headcount planning. Same thing with potentially fundraising. These are all questions that you can potentially anticipate and then get ahead of and be that person they can go to. And so let's say start fast, really think like the business partners and people you're working with. And if you can kind of put those together, it should be a good relationship to get off the right foot on.
Yeah, I like that. I agree. I remember when I joined Tala, I got similar advice, which is really think through how like your partner or your boss would be thinking through, figure out the problems they want to solve, and start maybe brainstorming around those solutions. So definitely bring solutions before problems is one of the mottos I live by. Cool.
Yeah, I
So
think it's sorry, no, I was gonna say the other thing too that a lot of good people that I've worked with tend to do is they don't really just stop at the deliverable or the data. They sort of give the so what, and like there's always a reason why folks are doing what they're doing, right? Whether it's like pulling, a Salesforce report or updating a model, there's the question behind that. And I think that's a really good way is like if someone's asking you to do something or if something tends to get done regularly, the so what behind it, and potentially, once again, anticipating what they're going to ask to be able to give them the answer so they can go do the next thing, is I think really valuable and, really helps everybody in the long run.
yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So jumping over to more like on a career level, strategic finance, as we discussed a little earlier, it's kind of this new field. A lot of tech companies are labeling their finance jobs with StratFin or a version of StratFin. Um, how happy are you with it? Do you think that this is like a career path that you're very satisfied with? And how do you think it rolls up into your future? So I'll give you my really quick viewpoint is traditional kind of finance or corporate finance roles, the path is to CFO. But, I've been in StratFin for 7 years ish, maybe a little bit more. And I see the path could go to anywhere. I've seen people from StratFin become COOs, CEOs, they go into VC. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Maybe I'll start with the first piece of like, are you happy? And then we could talk about, I think, the future behind that. I think so. I think at this point I've sort of worn a few different hats, and also sort of been on the venture side of things, and made the decision to come back. I think what I love about this specific role and this specific team, across all the different companies I've been at, is that especially like strategic finance, they get a really unique view on the business that I think most folks within a company don't have the opportunity to really experience. So whether it's at a Jasper or a Dropbox or a Tala or an Uber, like you're able to see essentially the full P&L and understand all the different inputs that go into a business, both from a cost side, but also from a revenue side. And so I remember when I first started at this, I was like, this is literally like the, business cases that we learned in school, right? You
Yep.
have X problem, could be, they're facing a growing cost, and like, what do you do about it? But in this scenario, you're actually able to figure out like, hey, you see every single input and you're able to understand like what could potentially change. Or revenue is not growing fast enough. You can understand maybe if you double click into some of these business lines, you actually are able to see one business line that's growing way faster than the other. And then you get to sort of debate this and work with the team to understand how it goes. And so I think the point of view of the strategic finance team is super unique within a company that I don't think you can get almost anywhere else. And so that's, I think, what makes it interesting and makes me want to keep coming back. And, I'd say I am very happy in the role. In the future, I think it's still TBD, to be honest, on my end. There are, I think, being a head of or VP of finance would be really exciting. I think potentially jumping back into venture would be exciting as well with this experience. I same thing, seeing people go into the COO path. So I think the future is TBD, but I do know the experience that I have here, being able to really understand the full business end to end, and wear multiple different hats, whether you're supporting the VP of sales, the VP of CS, the VP of engineering, product, or design. Really kind of equips me and other folks in, I think, my position, to really have sort of the optionality going forward.
Oh, I think I lost you. Oh, there you're back. Cool. um, okay. I mean, yes, I'm a big fan of the role. I agree. Double down on what you say that we get a very unique point of view on the business. We get to be involved in cross-functional conversations, right? And it's sometimes it's quite obvious, how working with the marketing team can relate, working with your sales team or with your customer service team. But sometimes working with the legal team and working with product design might not be that obvious. And until you're in this sort of role, you start to realize how, because of one small legal issue, your product design has to fundamentally change. So yes, it's a very, very a privileged and unique position to be in. Two more questions for you. One, what is something that you don't like about strategic finance, and something that maybe either overwhelms you or stresses you, or something that you feel like is annoying, and just something that people should know about? If there is something, I have one,
No,
but
yeah.
I want to hear you first.
Yeah, no, there are definitely things. I'd say like one thing immediately comes to mind, and it's kind of interesting. So we are on the strategic finance side of stuff, but at the end of the day, like our job is underlined with data. And so data is really like the main function, and like the main foundation for everything we do. And data is never perfect, whether it is in a financial system or whether it's in a, data warehouse or something. And so I think that on a pretty regular basis, whether it's was my time at Dropbox or whether it's time here, like that is something that you always have to you tend to sort of be the first line of defense for. And it's just something that you sort of have to figure out with the data teams to debug whether, hey, an invoice came in wrong, or, our ARR is looking a bit weird this week, or, hey, like our pipeline number is a little bit different. So it's just one of those like necessary evils, because we tend to be good stewards of this data. We do tend to also be the first line of defense for a lot of, when things might be going wrong, either in a, because the data is wrong, or going wrong because the business is going the wrong direction. So I think that's one of the things where, there's sometimes like, we'll be debugging reports or debugging queries. And it's just one of those things that we have to do because we tend to be the best or some of the best at the company at, and we enjoy it. But, it's definitely something that, can take up some time on a week, especially if, something kind of big breaks or whatnot. So that's probably the thing that comes to mind. It's a necessary evil, but I think it, makes us better at our jobs. What about you?
It's an interesting point. I have a lot of issues with data. I would say that's probably number 2 or 3 for me. I think top of the list, and my CFO is going to hate me saying this multiple times on different podcasts, but I think the one for me is on the StratFin team. We sort of play that investor relations type role with our board as well, and so sometimes it does feel like you're back in in your classic kind of like investment banking role or capital markets role where you're always on call. There's definitely excitement to it. Again, it's a very privileged position to be in, and you're grateful for it. But I would say that's probably the top of the downsides, where you could end up with a Friday 4 p.m. request. But the perks definitely outweigh. So that's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Been there.
and then, so for just the last question, Kevin, I was going to do this in the beginning, but just one fun fact about you. What's something you want sort of like our audience to hear? I know a quick background you mentioned, and I think you said you were at Dropbox, and then you moved to you worked in, is it VC? You said. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then now you're here at Jasper. So yeah, what's one fun fact about you?
What's one fun fact about me? That's a good question. I'd say one thing that just immediately comes to mind is so I was on a dance team in school, and then the reason why I'm bringing this up now is because I just picked up. We did a ballroom dance for my wedding that just happened last month, and it was kind of a fun sort of return to I don't know, it's like a return
Nice.
back to it. It was something you get to pick back up again, so completely different, I gotta say. And it was definitely like not. It's not like riding a bike, kind of get back up there, but it was a lot of fun. So hopefully you'll be seeing more dancing in the future, but either way it's a good thing, and everyone should try it out sometime, whether it's with your partner or by yourself. It's always a blast.
That's so funny. I did hip hop. When was it? Like 2017 to 2019. I did a couple of years of hip hop. So I wasn't as I wasn't in high school or anything, but also same thing for us. For me, I stopped, in about 2019, and then a month or 2 months ago, we were on YouTube with my now wife, just practicing dance. So um, that's very funny. Yes, it's not like riding a bike. You definitely lose a few of the moves.